Hey everybody, Heather Ruesch here, and I brought in my hubby, Pastor Matt Ruesch, to join me for this round. Wanted to touch base with you guys again. I put a little teaser out there on Facebook last night talking about an article that I came across. It was an article that's talking about Planned Parenthood's new app for teenagers, specifically geared to towards 12 to 17-year-olds. The app is called Chatbot. And it's essentially a robot app that youth, 12 to 17-year-olds primarily, can use to ask questions, things that they're curious about as far as sexuality and unplanned pregnancy and abortion and all of those kind of hot topic issues that I talk about and that I'm wanting to encourage all of you guys to talk about as well. And so I brought Matt in on this because we had some good discussion about it last night. And it bothered me to see that there's an app out there that is being used as the main communication tool for our youth. So,
yeah, and I think when I encountered the article, my first reaction was, I can see how kids would be drawn to this because they want someone who will talk to them about these things.
Exactly.
And we're so hesitant as parents, as adults in children's lives, to talk about these things ourselves. Yep. And that's the thing that Planned Parenthood does well. Not that I want to give them a whole ton of credit and praise, but they're willing to talk to kids about the things that we're uncomfortable talking about.
And they do it really well, actually, as far as getting people's attention. They don't do it very well as far as the information that they're giving. And that's exactly what bothers me is that, one of the comments that came up last night from an incredible friend of mine who always challenges me is, what about those kids who don't have a strong family structure, who don't have parents to talk to, who don't have a church leader that, they're involved in, or a church that they're involved with. And isn't this program then, things like the chatbot app or, the programs that Planned Parenthood offers, aren't those great tools then for, kids who are in need and really have no one else to talk to? And I guess my response to that is there will always be families that suffer, that don't have the tools that they need to equip their children or to equip themselves to live healthy, strong lives and have healthy, strong relationships and marriages. And where Matt and I came to in that conversation was there's one remedy to that, and it's not false information. It's Jesus Christ, and it's the church reaching out and being there in the gap. And I guess where I would counter is if we see that that information is being given to these kids, I think we're doing them a great disservice by giving them false information that's going to hurt them. For example, just to give you an idea of why we're so against the information that's being given, this app is directed to 12 to 17-year-olds, and this really falls in suit with what Planned Parenthood's sexual education curriculum that has been in the news. It's been a little bit risky and been proven that way. People have been questioning the sexual education curriculum by Planned Parenthood for a long time now. But, for an example, one of the things that they're advocating for is teaching 12-year-olds how to enjoy and give anal and oral sex. Now, if you want your children to know how to do that at the age of 12 and you feel like that's a vital, important thing, then I guess, we should go right ahead and let Planned Parenthood continue what they're doing. But if you're a parent who wants to teach your child the value of, sexuality and God's intentions for sex and marriage and healthy relationships, then we've got to be the chatbot, right, parents? We've got to be the ones that our kids can come to. And I think that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day.
And I think, too, the important thing to remember is Planned Parenthood comes across as caring about your kids. But if you don't care about human life in its earliest stages, children in the womb, you fundamentally don't care for human life as a whole.
Right.
And you hear a lot of people who will say, well, abortion is a small part of what Planned Parenthood does. They'll they like to parrot the quote, it's 3% of what we do. But that fundamental flaw, it pervades everything else that they do.
That's right.
None of us would be so foolish to say something like, well, Nazi Germany gave us great art and music and great culture. The Holocaust was only 3 or 4% of what they did. No, it was a whole system of thought that was flawed and evil. The bottom line is Planned Parenthood is willing to be vocal, willing to do what it takes, put forward the money, the resources to get in your children's ear so that they'll come back to them if they need reproductive health services one day, if they need to terminate a pregnancy, to get an abortion. They want to be there and show that they are there for your kids. And as Heather said, we need to be the ones that speak to our kids and to all those that we have sort of a relationship with. I mean, we as parents ourselves, we have kids that come into our lives through our children that we kind of end up, maybe being sort of parent figures to them and able to speak some of the values that are important to us as a family that we routinely speak to our kids. That's the beauty of the world God's put us in, that we live in community with one another. Right. We're not, and my body, my choice doesn't work because we don't live in isolation.
Right.
A pregnancy is 2 lives, but it's more than that. It's the father who was there for the making of that child. It's the family of the mother, the grandparents of the baby. It's the siblings and friends and the community. We live in relationship with one another. None of these things happen in isolation.
Right.
So the challenge is on us to be ourselves that resource that kids go to. And that starts with just realizing you can talk about these things. You have a voice. You can speak about sex, about premarital sex, about teen sex, about the anal sex and oral sex that Planned Parenthood is willing to talk about. You can talk about those things.
And the reality is they're willing to talk to your kids about it. Mm-hmm. So we need to know where this information is that they're what they're receiving. And if they're willing to talk to your kids about it, then we need to be willing to talk to our kids about it as well. Mm-hmm. You said before Planned Parenthood has a system of belief. And that is true. They have a system of belief that, is evolutionary. One procedure or one service leads to the next. And
right.
And there is a great marketing and consumerism push that they've been, keen to for probably 100 years or more. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I talk about in my book, Sexuality Mentality, is the sexual propaganda and how it started many, many years ago, like back in the 1940s and 50s, and how that's influenced our culture. And the reason it's called Sexuality Mentality is because we too, as Christians, as Christian parents, we need to have a system of beliefs that we follow when it comes to raising our children, instructing them well, and preparing them, equipping them to have healthy futures and healthy relationships and healthy marriages someday. It's that system of beliefs. It's understanding what God's will was, what his intention was when he created us first, the incredible value that we have, and then recognizing the incredible value of our neighbor and everything that fills in the middle.
And remember that it's intimidating to try and stand up to something like Planned Parenthood. And we think that if we're going to promote a culture of life, if we're going to take on things like Planned Parenthood, we need the right politicians, the right people in positions of leadership, the right Supreme Court justices, that these are the things that are going to make the biggest difference. Actually, the biggest difference is a whole army of people like you, parents who care, parents who are willing to have that awkward conversation with your teenager, parents who are willing to fight, do whatever is necessary for the soul of their child, for the purity of their child, for the holiness of their child. The Bible talks about God making us as a holy people. We're set apart. We're different from the rest of the world. And you by yourself can't stop the Planned Parenthood machine. You can't stop the big money abortion business, but you can make a difference in the life of one person or the people that God has entrusted you with in your family, your children, your grandchildren, the people that God has put in your path. And be bold, speak, and let's encourage one another as the church, as fellow Christians, to talk, because we learn to talk by listening to others talk.
Absolutely. Well, isn't that just how babies learn? You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I talk a lot about the flavor that you are in your family. You know, we're our family. We're all Ruesches, and everyone can tell that we're Ruesches because we kind of look alike, we kind of talk alike, and the things that we do remind us of one another because we've been watching and listening to each other for nearly 20 years now.
Our kids mimic us. They take on our mannerisms, our ways of speaking for good and bad, and that's natural. That's how it happens. And the same thing happens in the church. It starts by hearing God speak his word to us, his love, his promises that show that we're valued, that our lives matter. Before you can talk to your kids about how their life matters, about how their sexual integrity matters, you have to know that you matter as well, that Christ died for you. You belong to him. You are his. He sent his son. God sent his son Christ to die for you. And that gives you tremendous value. And it gives everyone whom you have brought into Christ through God's word, that gives them value as well.
So, and that reminds me of one more last point that I just want to make. And that is, we've always really communicated, probably over communicated with our kids a little too much, but we're both public speakers. Matt's a pastor, I'm a speaker. And so we probably over communicate a little bit, but the wonderful thing about that is the fact that our kids are really well informed, and we're able to tell them, here's what the culture is saying is okay. Here's what God is saying is okay. And, the difference is they can put the lie up next to the truth, and they can recognize the truth. So, whether or not, a lie is being thrown their way, they understand God's truth first and foremost. And so that's the filter that all of this other stuff from the culture goes through first. And I think that's really important that they're able to make those decisions in an informed way because they've been shown what the truth is first.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think, things like the chat bot, things like consumerism and sexual propaganda in our culture through movies and TV shows and music, and all around us, there's all of this sexual propaganda. We are a culture that is consumed with sex and casual sex, and I think for our kids, a lot of them are learning that as the truth first, and then they're being let down, and they're feeling empty and lonely and hopeless because they think that this is it. They think that this is love. Right. This was God's intention. This is as good as it gets.
Because the parents should have been the first voice they heard.
Right.
That's how they should have learned to talk about it and think about it.
We've got to be the chatbot.
Right. And
parents,
it's not too late to do that. You can do that. You can be the one. And you don't have to have all the answers, but you do have to have a willingness to listen to your child and speak to your child about things that maybe you've been uncomfortable to speak about in the
past. Look for resources, look for support, look for help. I mean, that's why Matt does what he does, sharing the love of Christ and, the sacraments and the gospel and, all the teaching that's in the church. That's why he does it, because God loves you so very much that he wills that you know his ways for you, because they're the good ways. They're the good ways for a healthy life. But, that's why I do what I do too. I want to share encouragements with you as parents, and try not to get caught up in all the political stuff that's going on, but just inform, because we all know that there's an issue with our teenagers and casual sex in our culture. So, I want to just be a resource to share information from experiences that I've had throughout my life, and as an executive director of crisis pregnancy centers, working as a life issues speaker and advocate for many years. I want to be able to share that information to help you feel equipped. And I'm still learning too. So I always say, let's find our voice on these issues together. And together we can make a difference, and we can be the voice that our children listen to.
Right.
I think that's it. Hey.
All right.
All right, you guys. Well, we sure love to hear from you. Thanks for taking a few minutes to hang with us, and God's blessings on your day.